My first prediction is that the Magnificent Three, Bitcoin, ETH, and Solana, are each going to make all-time highs in 2025. I think Coinbase equity will as well, to bring in our TradFi allocation to crypto. I think Bitcoin, ETH, and Solana are all going up and going up substantially. I know before this, you asked me if I would do price targets. I'm willing to do price targets.
Okay.
At the start of last year, Bitcoin was at 40. We said it was going to go to 80. Now we're in the 90s when we record this. I think Bitcoin will end the year at 200,000. I think it's going to double again next year. And I think if we get a U.S. government strategic reserve that actually buys or is on pace to buy $1 million Bitcoin, then I think that too could be 4 or 5. I think it could be really substantial.
Bitwise CIO Matt Hougan has given his top predictions for the cryptocurrency and digital assets space in 2025. His predictions cut across a number of bullish short to long-term trends for the space, including spot crypto exchange-traded funds, increased institutional adoption, and nation-states' interest in cryptocurrencies. The first part of Hougan's predictions is his price targets for what he describes as the big three cryptocurrencies: Bitcoin, Ethereum, and Solana. As expected, Hougan is very bullish on all three cryptocurrencies for different reasons. For Bitcoin, which he predicts could go as high as $400,000 in 2025, Hougan predicts increased institutional investment through the spot Bitcoin ETFs and the possibility of a U.S. strategic Bitcoin reserve before year-end. Hougan also has bullish predictions for Ethereum, the largest altcoin by market cap, which he predicts will easily smash new all-time highs in 2025. Hougan is equally bullish, if not more bullish, on Solana, which he says is generating a lot of institutional interest. During a recent conversation with Milk Road, Hougan said, "We get a lot of questions that skip straight to Solana. I think there's an aspect of the institutional investor who crosses the chasm into crypto, starting with Bitcoin, and then wants to explore what's next. It's not seen as that cool to stick with just Bitcoin and Ethereum. Instead, they're looking at what's next, and that often leads to Solana. There's this narrative of Solana as a phoenix rising out of the ashes of FTX." During the conversation, Hougan gives more bullish 2025 predictions for spot crypto ETFs, stablecoins, the GameFi industry, and last but not least, crypto regulation in and out of the United States. As we bring you clips from the discussion, please take a little time to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on post notifications for more videos like this. Everything you do helps with the YouTube algorithm and immensely contributes to the channel's growth. Thanks, and enjoy the video.
I think the probability of the U.S. not selling the 200,000 Bitcoin it has is very high, 80, 90%. I think the probability of it agreeing to acquire another million is probably something like a third or a quarter, which is not zero, right? It's not zero. It's not zero at all. But the reason our forecast is 200K is because that assumes that doesn't happen, right? So certainly the last few weeks have taught us a lot of crazy stuff could happen. I think it's, 25% or 30% chance is pretty good, considering you're talking about something that will ultimately drive Bitcoin's price to $1 million or more. But I don't think it's the most likely scenario. And it would require a lot of prioritization on the political side and then not a lot of pushback. You're just asking for a lot. So, eventually, do I think it's going to get there? Do I think we're going to get widespread government adoption of Bitcoin across multiple governments? I absolutely do. I just don't want to put my stake in the ground and say it's going to be the next 12 months. I think it could very well happen. But probably the base case is it doesn't.
What are your thoughts on Ethereum for next year?
Yeah, I think it's going to set new all-time high as well. I think it'll pip over its previous and get to something like 5K. I think there are two catalysts for it. The reason I think ETH will stop being the forgotten asset. The first is, I've spent a lot of time on the past few days digging into the layer 2 space and particularly into the sort of the Starknet validity proof side of that spectrum. And it's getting really fast and really efficient. So I really do think we're solving ETH's throughput challenge. And then on the flip side, one of my core beliefs for next year is we're going to see Wall Street come into crypto in a major way through stablecoins, through tokenization projects, the most of that's going to come into ETH. So you have improving technology, and then you have a series of headlines: ETH, 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 ETH in Goldman Sachs, ETH in JP Morgan, ETH in UBS. And I think that's going to be enough to get it out of the doldrums, right? Will it outperform other sort of altcoins, if you want to call them that? I'm not sure. But can it get back to new all-time highs? I think absolutely. But I think the challenge ETH has is it's moved into sort of this fundamental space where it's driven, it's sort of made the transition from being driven by memes and headlines to being driven by fundamental activity. And that's a complex space where you have this challenge of L2 fee compression and burn, right? And once you sort of seen tech companies go through this when they go from pre-revenue to post-revenue, and there's this awkward teenage moment where they're like, if you value them on fundamentals, it doesn't quite add up, but they're not really meme driven. And I think that's where ETH is. I think those fundamentals start to really ramp in 2026 when the projects we're seeing built really start gaining traction. So yeah, 5,000, you can call me bearish, but it is a new all-time high, and there probably is upside. But I think that's the challenge it's going to face next year.
Very interesting. Okay, let's go to the last one, Solana.
Yeah, Sol, we debate this internally. Look, I think it's going to have a great year. I think it's probably going to outperform ETH. I think 750 could be easy. You could see it get to 1,000. That's certainly not within the realm of craziness. I think the catalyst for Sol that we're monitoring is it's established this dominant position in sort of the crypto community space, and particularly with meme coins and sort of fun items. I think it's going to add to that more serious projects moving on to a more established Solana ecosystem. We've seen that in the past with things like Render, but I think you're going to see it in an accelerating basis. And if you get sort of dual thrusts, like the fun casino part of crypto or the community part of crypto, and the more institutional part of crypto, that's a pretty good narrative to lift it, up to double or triple in the year ahead. Second prediction is that Bitcoin ETFs will attract more inflows in 2025 than they did in 2024. Obviously,
wow.
I feel really strongly about this one. So I think there's such a success, Bitcoin ETFs, right? They've pulled in, we don't know the full numbers, but call it $30+ billion, the most ever of any ETF. And I think there's this assumption that there is this pent up demand, and it's now been taken care of. And now we're going to see like a few $1 billion. But there's no reason to assume this is true. Let me give you the counterfactuals. The first is that in ETF land, year one is always the slowest. If you look at any ETF, it grows the most in year one, or it goes a little bit in year one, and year 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 grow substantially beyond that. That's what happened with gold, what's happened with almost every ETF ever. So that's a big piece of it. The second counterfactual is that the Bitcoin ETFs aren't even approved on the largest wealth management platforms. They have partial approval on Morgan Stanley. They're not yet approved on Wells Fargo or UBS or others. There's trillions of dollars that can't even buy them yet. And then the third is that, look, institutions just move slow. So far, many of the adopters of crypto ETPs have been retail, and I think institutions are starting to come on board, and I think they're going to accelerate substantially in 2025. So yeah, we think $30 billion is a down payment. We think it may be more like 40, 50 in the year to come.
What happened? Why was ETH ETF been why has it been so flat? Why has it not succeeded the way the Bitcoin ETF has?
Yeah, such a dog. I think there are two things that I underestimated in expecting the success of the product. The first was I underestimated the outflows from ETH. So, the people look at the net flows, and we're now in positive net flows, but for a while we were in negative net flows. But they forget that ETH bled, $3.5 billion in assets. And that's a lot to overcome. And I thought because ETH's discount had narrowed long before the ETF launched, that much of the arbitrage activity was already out of the space. And that turned out to be wrong, right? So you had this flood of assets on the downside that reduces the number. If we were here and they were like 3 or 4 billion, it'd be the second most successful ETF launch of all time. and we'd be talking about it as a success. And then the second one is I thought ETH was going to catch a bid, right? This has been a atypical sort of crypto cycle where Bitcoin has accelerated its dominance, and what non-Bitcoin activity there has skipped a generation and hit Sol on down. And when you put those two things together, you get the result that we had. Long term, I'm still bullish. We're excited about our ETF. It's a few $100 million. In the scheme of most ETFs, that would be a massively successful launch. But yeah, it's been much slower than I think most ETF experts sort of anticipated.
Bitwise has expanded its ETF ambitions beyond Bitcoin and Ethereum by joining the race to launch a US spot Solana ETF. When asked about the likelihood of approval in 2025, Matt Hougan expressed confidence, highlighting that we've entered the ETF era of crypto. He foresees a wave of ETFs or ETPs emerging across various assets, including Solana. A major driver of this optimism is the election of the first pro-Bitcoin and pro-crypto president in U.S. history, President-elect Donald Trump. Hougan believes that Trump's inauguration will usher in transformative regulatory reforms, creating a favorable environment for cryptocurrencies and digital assets. Hougan predicts a strong likelihood of spot Solana ETF approvals in 2025, paired with sweeping regulatory changes that could ignite a bullish surge for the cryptocurrency space. Here are more bullish 2025 predictions from Matt Hougan.
I think stablecoin assets could double, which would put them above $350 billion. I think there are two primary drivers of this. The one everyone talks about is that we're likely to see stablecoin legislation that allows them to exist in a regulated format in the new Congress. And that will obviously be a dramatic spur to adoption. We're also seeing growth in payments, both globally and domestically. But the other thing I think people overlook is just, stablecoin assets rise when you're in a bull market. That's just always been true. So I think there's a natural bullish push behind stablecoins and then an accelerant from stablecoin legislation. Add them together, I think it's $350 billion by the end of the year. We think there'll be another mainstream crypto application that sort of crosses the chasm and gains more than 1 million monthly users. I personally think it's likely to be in the gaming space. I think you're seeing a lot of investment. You're seeing a lot of big names, right? I saw a headline just a few days ago about FIFA and Mythical Games launching FIFA Rivals. You see some first-person shooter stuff. Blockchain has gone from dial-up to broadband, and now we're starting to see developers build in that space. Games are often the first thing to break. So I think there'll be some blockchain-based game that gets really massive, permanent adoption, not just flash in the pan, play to earn adoption, but people using it as primarily a game. I'm talking about games that are actually fun, right? I mean, I do think blockchain and Web3 is just a fundamentally amazing utility for games. And I think it's been gated by performance, and that gate has fallen over the past few years. And so now that we have highly performant blockchains, layer 1 and layer 2 networks, it strikes me as inevitable that this space, which for what it's worth, people forget, is the largest media space, right? Like it's bigger than movies, bigger than TV. It's absolutely massive.
You mean gaming?
Yeah.
You mean gaming when
you
you
think of gaming as like my 11-year-old wasting time, but it's actually this massive media market. I think it moves substantially in the blockchain direction this year.
Yeah. Final prediction for 2025.
Yeah, this ties back to that first prediction. It's that governments, corporations, and ETFs will purchase more than 1 million Bitcoin in 2025. We talked about looking at, why will Bitcoin go to 200,000? I talked about re-underwriting my thesis in the space. As I look at these three sort of drivers of massive Bitcoin demand, it's just hard to see how it doesn't happen. I mean, Michael Saylor bought 200,000 Bitcoin himself last year, and he plans to accelerate that in the new year. The reason I like this framing is that for people who are skeptical of this space, I try to point them at a few simple supply-demand metrics. We know next year that the Bitcoin network will produce 160,000 Bitcoin. Do you think ETFs, which bought 400 plus thousand Bitcoin, will buy more or fewer next year? I think they'll buy more. Do you think corporations, which bought another 300,000 or 400,000 Bitcoin, will buy more or fewer next year? Well, not only is Saylor ramping up, but every day there's a new company that announces it's adding Bitcoin to its balance sheet. I think it's more. Do we think governments, which were sellers of Bitcoin last year with the German government cashing out, the US threatening to, do we think they will be positive or negative? I think they'll be positive. And then you look at that, you get to 1 million Bitcoin on one side of the ledger and 160,000 on the other side. You say, where is the other 840,000 going to come from? And the answer is higher prices. And so I like it because it breaks down the source of demand. And I think it's hard to be bearish if you think about it that way.
According to Bloomberg, BlackRock's iShares Bitcoin Trust, IBIT, has made history as the most successful ETF launch ever. The world's largest asset manager, BlackRock, capped off 2024 with a record-breaking $11.5 trillion in assets under management, driven by significant net inflows and favorable market conditions. Nate Geraci, president of the ETF store, hailed IBIT as the greatest launch in ETF history, a sentiment echoed by the fund's staggering numbers. As of December 30th, IBIT holds over $50 billion in Bitcoin, equivalent to 552,554.76 Bitcoin, with holdings valued at approximately $52.4 billion. Since its debut on January 11, 2024, IBIT has amassed $37.31 billion in net inflows, outpacing all other ETFs. Bloomberg intelligence analyst James Seifert commented on IBIT's meteoric rise, calling it unprecedented, and noting that no ETF has ever reached major milestones this quickly across any asset class. While IBIT has dominated inflows, Grayscale's Bitcoin Trust, GBTC, has experienced a stark reversal, shedding $21.35 billion after transitioning from an over-the-counter, OTC product to a public ETF. Despite GBTC's record-breaking outflows, the broader success of Bitcoin ETFs highlights a significant shift in investor sentiment toward digital assets. Do you agree with Hougan's observation that IBIT and other spot Bitcoin ETFs will see even more bullish activities in 2025? Please share your thoughts, comments, and observations in the comments section below. If you liked this video and would like more content like this, please give this video a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and turn on post notifications for more videos. Thanks for watching our videos.